In January of 1996, a young police officer in Varginha, Brazil, loaded a strange creature into the back of a cruiser and drove it to the hospital. The creature was about 4 feet tall and walked on 2 legs. Its skin was dark and oily. Its eyes were large and red, and it offered no resistance. 3 weeks later, the officer was dead. His widow was denied a copy of his death certificate. His funeral was held on a military base without her knowledge, and his medical records were seized by the Brazilian army the day after he died. For 30 years, the governments of both Brazil and the United States denied that any of this happened. Witnesses were threatened. Researchers were stonewalled. The case became one of those stories that serious investigators knew about and most people had never heard of. Well, on June 9th, 2026, yesterday, as we record this, a filmmaker named James Fox stood on the steps of the United States Capitol and spent his entire opening statement asking the President of the United States to declassify the Varginha files. And the former Brazilian Minister of Defense, who was in power when the incident happened, confirmed publicly for the first time that it was all real. That was only the beginning of what happened on those steps. Welcome to today's special episode, and welcome back to Infinite Rabbit.
Imagine that this line represents the time, present 1985, future, past. Prior to this point in time, somewhere in the past, the timeline skewed into this tangent, creating an alternate 1985. Alternate you, me, and Einstein. Fuck reality for everyone else.
What's up, everyone? I'm Jeremy Sosha, and you're listening to The Infinite Rabbit Hole, your weekly briefing on the unexplained. Tonight, I'm joined by my co-host, Jake, and we are recording this on June 10th, the evening after one of the most significant press events of not only the history of UAP conversation in the country, but potentially one of the most important press events in history, if everything falls in order. If you're a Patreon member, you're getting this episode on June 11th. If you're on the public feed, this drops June 16th. Either way, this is a different kind of episode. No quick hits, no briefings in the traditional sense, just one story, told the way it deserves to be told. Before we get into it, my book, UF Elmwood, is on Amazon now. Search Jeremy Sosha or UF Elmwood, and as always, the link is in the description. Hey, good news. We also hit 1,000 YouTube subscribers, and I want to genuinely say thank you. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen. On July 18th, I'll be presenting at the MUFON, Wisconsin meeting at the Waukesha Airport, and on July 25th, I'll be presenting and leading bus tours at Elmwood, Wisconsin's UFO Days Festival, and I would love to meet you at either one of those events. Jake, ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. And
You
I
have
could
any
be at both of the MUFON and UFO days. So
So if you wanted to meet Jake, and maybe he'll have his crazy hair back then, who knows?
yeah, I'm gonna grow it all back out. I put Miracle Grow on my head, so
Yeah.
it'll come back.
Miracle Grow and Roundup to keep the bugs out.
Yes, well, must,
A must.
a must.
Anyways, man, you got anything for us before we jump into this big time special episode?
Well, I'm finally not sick. I was sick for like 2 weeks, like really bad cough last episode, so I definitely took a bailout. I was like, yeah, I can make it. And then I started a coughing fit and I almost puked and I was like, I can't make it. I need to back out. So I ended up backing out. But yeah, I'm all better. So I'm back, ready to go.
Well, you missed
tired
probably
after
one of
work.
the most awkward angles I've ever seen CJ, so it's all
Oh,
good.
really?
Yeah, for some reason, his camera was like pointing down towards his chest, and it's like, man, I don't think I ever wanted to see that angle of you.
I mean, I think a more crazy angle would be from like the scrot to the face. You just see a little tip of the pee-pee, and just kind of hanging out there at the bottom of the screen, just kind of poking up like that, just a little bit, and then the face,
Well, okay,
Yeah.
I stand
So
corrected. I'm
it
happy
could
that
be-
wasn't the view.
It could be. It's the second worst angle. The first worst is the tip of the pee-pee, and then the face, just the chin like this with a little bit of wiener sticking up.
I can't remember what he said was going on, but something with remodeling his studio or something along those lines. I could be completely wrong. I don't
Tell
really
him
care.
to never have
What
that
else?
angle again, though.
I told him, well, I'm going to tell him that he could do it one more time just so that you have to live through it too.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right. And then after that, only scrote to face. That's it. That's all we're
Only
going to take.
scrote the face.
You put the camera between your knees like a grown man, like the rest of us, you know?
All right. Well, you ready to get into it, man?
Ready to go. Let's do it.
Well, you weren't here last episode, so do you even know what event I'm talking about?
Dude, no, I was dying last episode.
Oh, man. Okay.
What happened to your
Well-
face? You get a crazy scar, like cut
Oh,
like right
yeah.
here.
Doesn't it look badass? Look at it.
It looks so badass. You get attacked by a bear?
No. A bush when I was mowing the lawn.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, and you can see like my sunglasses go right here,
oh, yeah.
and it's kind of funny.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I was pissed.
I bet.
I was pretty pissed. To give you a quick rundown of what happened in the shortest synopsis ever, David Grush, the guy who spilled the beans to Congress about UFOs and the government, said that on June 9th, yesterday, that he would be on the steps of the Capitol singing like a canary about non-human intelligence.
We talked about that a
And-
couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Actual biological beings.
And he did it.
And he did it.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about today.
Okay.
All day. Because there was a lot there. And for those people that aren't familiar with some of the things that was discussed, I'm going to break it down. And we're going to have some fun. All right. Let me tell you what actually happened yesterday, because I think the significance of it is easy to miss if you're just reading headlines. At 1 p.m. on June 9th, a group assembled on the steps of the United States Capitol. No protesters. They weren't advocates at a rally. No, this group consisted of sitting members of Congress. The journalist, whose 2017 New York Times story fundamentally changed how the mainstream press covered UAPs, a filmmaker who has spent 30 years investigating this on the grounds across multiple continents, and the man who in 2023 sat before Congress under penalty of perjury and said the United States government has recovered craft of non-human origin. They were there because David Grush had said publicly that this press conference was about moving from testimony to action, and because enough people in positions of power had decided the time for careful, measured, incremental disclosure was now over. James Fox opened it, and the choice he made in that opening to spend his entire time on stage talking about Varginha, Brazil, rather than Tic Tacs or radar returns or any of the footage from the Pursue releases, was deliberate. He has spent 16 years on that case specifically because it involves not just craft, but beings, living, intelligent, non-human beings that multiple witnesses say were transported out of Brazil and into the United States. He stood there and said that the former Brazilian Minister of Defense has confirmed the incident occurred and that Brazil is ready to disclose what it knows if the United States does the same. And then he said 5 words directly to the President of the United States, quote, "Reality should not be classified." Now, before we get too far tonight, if you'd like to learn more about this incredible story from Varginha, Brazil, please check out episode 132 of The Infinite Rabbit Hole. In that documentary-style episode, I broke down the entirety of the case, with most of my research coming from a book I highly recommend titled UFO Crash in Brazil by Dr. Roger K. Lear. Here's a picture of it for those that are watching the video tonight. It is a purple book, and you can get it off Amazon. It's a great book. There is also a really good documentary, too. What struck me watching this presser was how different the tone was from every congressional hearing that came before it. The hearings were careful. People chose words with precision. Hedged, qualified, deferred to classification boundaries. Yesterday felt different. Jared Moskowitz stood at the microphone and said plainly that he doesn't know what the full truth is, but he knows the American people are being lied to. Tim Burchett told a story about sitting in a classified briefing and having a staffer tell him that the President of the United States is on a need-to-know basis on the issue and calling it exactly what it is. And Leslie Keane, who has been covering this longer than almost anyone in the room, made a specific ask that separated yesterday from everything before it. She said the conversation needs to shift from technology to biology. She said a former Congressional Intelligence Committee staffer who was standing on those steps was personally present in the classified settings when senior senators were briefed about recovered non-human bodies, and she asked a question that nobody in an official capacity has been willing to answer. Quote, by what authority can any institution on Earth withhold confirmation of what may be the most consequential scientific discovery in human history? So, Jake, I just painted the scene for you. Congressional members, a whistleblower, a journalist, and a filmmaker on the steps of the Capitol asking a question that nobody has formally answered. Before we get into the details of what Grush specifically said, where did your head go as you're watching this unfold? Obviously, you didn't watch it.
Is the Virginia incident, isn't that the one that had the people they said were gold mining jetpackers or something like that? You sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Was it Brazil where it was like the government just said like, oh, they were trying to keep people away from a gold mine and they were using jetpacks and flying through the jungle?
Why does that sound so familiar?
I want to say it was this topic. I might be wrong in like my nomenclature, but it's like
I don't. Maybe it's been a while since I've covered it. It's been a while since I've read the book. Maybe I should have read through my notes on that episode. Maybe, possibly. I know that we did talk about this. The conversation is familiar to me. I just can't remember which story that was. I mean, we've heard some really insane and quite stupid answers when it comes to what people report seeing. What'd you find?
Yeah, the topic of Brazilian jetpack users in the jungle refers to a bizarre real-life saga that unfolded along the Brazil-Peru border in the Amazon rainforest in mid-2023. Isolated indigenous communities in the Peruvian Amazon began reporting attacks by hovering 7-foot-tall aliens they described as looking like the Green Goblin.
Yes. Okay. So that was much newer than Varginha.
Okay.
Varginha was 1996.
We've talked about Virginia before, and we've talked about Brazil before, and so I don't know, my brain just kind of made the connection. I was just didn't know if that was...
Good question. It is. I remember talking about it, but it doesn't click with Virginia for me.
Okay. What did we talk about with Virginia? I think we talked about the UFO thing. We've covered so many topics. It's hard to kind of, keep track of them all.
Just goes to show you how infinite the rabbit hole is. Oh,
yeah,
he said it. He said it. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like you said, we've covered a lot from Brazil. Caloris, maybe it was, no, I don't think Caloris was it either. It was because Caloris happened way before 1990 or 2023. Way before. That sounds like a news episode that we did, like one of the first ones.
I like the question that was asked at the very end. By what authority can any institution on Earth withhold confirmation of what may be the most consequential scientific discovery in human history? That's a great question.
Yeah, you're talking about the one Leslie Keane asked. Leslie Keane, for those of you guys that may not know or didn't catch it in the script, she was the one that broke the New York Times article about the Tic Tac video. And basically the Tic Tac gimbal go fast videos, and that there was this secret entity within the government that was still watching UFOs, UAP. I say still because on official record, right, Blue Book was the last time that the government officially looked at this kind of material, but that's not true. If two books, I know I recommend these books a lot, and I'll recommend them again because if you want to know more about this specific article and its history and how it affects what we're doing today, read Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by James Lukatsky, Colin Kelleher, and George Knapp. And then the other one would be Imminent by Luis Elizondo. Those two books mend really well together. Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, dives heavily into personal meetings that he had with Leslie Keane prior to that article coming out, and kind of the fallout from that article coming out. Very, very historical article that set a lot of what we're talking about today and what we're seeing in congressional hearings and everything, even the Pursue records being dropped, all kind of fell at the end of the dominoes falling from that article coming out. That's how important Leslie Keane is. So yeah, she asked a great question. Absolutely.
What did they say?
Let's get into the rest of the script. What do you think?
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right. All right. So I know I said check out the Varginha episode, but I did take a section of tonight's script and kind of summarize it for you guys. So I want to spend real time on Varginha because Fox opened the most significant UAP press conference in recent American history with it. And I think most people listening don't have the full picture of what he was asking to be declassified. It starts on the afternoon of January 20th, 1996 in Varginha, a city of about 100,000 people in southeastern Brazil. 3 young women, 2 sisters, and a co-worker were walking home. They took a shortcut that evening through an abandoned lot and found something crouched near a concrete wall that stopped all 3 of them cold. A creature, roughly 4 to 5 feet tall, dark, oily skin, no visible neck, enormous dark red eyes, and 3 bony ridges that ran from its forehead to the back of its skull. When it stood and noticed them, all 3 women ran. The sisters would later say they believe they had seen the devil. What came next is where the story gets extraordinary. Later that same evening, 2 Brazilian military police officers encountered a creature matching that description walking on a public road nearby. It showed no reaction when they approached. It offered no resistance when they loaded it into the back of their cruiser and drove it first to a local clinic, then to Hospital Regional, and then to the larger Hospital Humanitas. A surgeon who was there, interviewed anonymously by UFO researcher Dr. Roger K. Leal, this book again, who investigated this case extensively and wrote a book about it, described what he found on the operating table in terms that have stayed with researchers ever since. The being was less than 5 feet tall, bipedal, dark brown skin that appeared shiny but was actually dry with a texture like large scales that disappeared under touch. Its head was massive related to its body. The eyes were large and red and had what the doctor described as a liquid quality. No detectable heartbeat, no detectable pulse, and toward the end of the procedure, a greenish mist began seeping from its back, after which the doctor locked eyes with the creature and described being suddenly flooded with an understanding of how these beings viewed humanity. The last thing Dr. Lear learned in that interview was that within 24 hours, the creature had completely healed from its injuries and left the hospital in satisfactory condition. The military police officer who first transported the creature was 23-year-old man named Marco Eli Charisse. 3 weeks after his encounter, he was dead. His sister described his final days as completely miserable, high fever, inability to eat, bleeding from multiple orifices. His wife was denied a copy of his death certificate. The funeral was held on a military base without her knowledge. His medical records were seized by the Brazilian army the day after he died. Lear's investigation found that anyone who had spoken to the wife or sister about the events immediately after Charisse's contact with the creature had clearly been prepared beforehand. He believed someone had gotten to them. The military response was swift and thorough. A separate creature captured the same day by military firefighters in a nearby wooded area was boxed in a wooden crate and transported to an army training facility, and multiple Brazilian army personnel who later came forward said it was flown by helicopter to Brasilia and eventually transferred to the United States. 39 days after the events of January 20th, American Secretary of State Warren Christopher and the Brazilian Minister of Foreign Relations signed a cooperative agreement on the peaceful use of outer space. The day after that, the administrator of NASA visited the Brazilian National Institute of Space Research. The researchers who have spent decades on this case consider that sequence of events meaningful. That is what James Fox asked the President of the United States to declassify on January 9th, and Aldo Rebelo, who served as Brazil's Minister of Defense and was in that government when the incident occurred, confirmed publicly that it happened. He has said that if the United States discloses its information on this case, Brazil will do the same. That offer has been on the table. The question is whether anyone will pick it up. Jake, a police officer dies after transporting a non-human being. His widow denied a death certificate. The surgeon who operated on it described a moment of what sounds like telepathic contact. And 30 years later, the former defense minister confirming it on the steps of the American Capitol. What does Varginha feel like to you?
One, you said January 9th instead of June 9th.
June 9th was yesterday. January 9th was the 1996 incident. June 9th was yesterday's press release at the Capitol steps.
Okay. So you just wrote it down wrong. Okay.
Did I? I probably did.
It sounds like a psyop. It sounds like they were transporting something that had radiation on it as well. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to the whole aliens thing.
I know you are.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm pretty skeptical. But at the same time, if I found a creature that didn't look like anything I had seen before and looked kind of shiny and scaly and not like a person, I probably wouldn't load it in the back of my truck and take it to go and get examined by medical. I'd probably just shoot it and then call someone else to come and look at it. You know, it's like,
hey, come look at this thing I killed.
Yeah, I mean,
jeez, man.
I like the other one, loaded into a crate and shipped to the United States. That makes more sense than just be like, yeah, let's put it in the back of the truck. Come on, guys.
That one does.
Let's all die from radiation sickness too at the end of it. Like maybe not radiation sickness, because radiation sickness is pretty bad. Like it's not the orify that are bleeding and oozing. It's everything that's bleeding and oozing as your skin falls off and your organs liquefy and all kinds of stuff.
I was going to say your viscera makes a soup.
Yeah. It's very, your insides become your outsides type stuff. Not so much just like you're bleeding from your holes. Of many holes that there are, on the human body. So,
and it creates new ones because it creates blistering, which pops, and then things leak out and all that.
Right. But I mean, like this one was just his holes were leaking, all of his holes. So I'm not certain if that's radiation more so than it's like something else that's crazy. Maybe space AIDS came back.
Ooh.
But,
we talk about space AIDS a lot on this
yes, we do. Because I mean, it's a real threat. So, no, I don't know, man. I have no idea. The fact that this incident, that's a good word for it. I was going to say story, but I was like, not story. Incident. This incident is being confirmed as true is wild.
I agree.
Well, keep in mind, it's been confirmed as true by the same people that lied to us for decades. So is it true?
That's also true.
Right? Is it actually true? I mean, I don't know.
That's also true. That's why we talk about it.
Right.
Hell yeah.
So that's where my brain goes. It's like it's hard to, after they admitted that they're a bunch of naughty little liars, it's hard to take anything they say as, oh well, finally we'll just declassify this. It was an incident that actually happened. These are real people. This was a real thing. It's hard to look at that and be like, oh well, finally they're going to tell the truth 100% of the time. It's like, I don't believe that.
I've always been interested in the Varginha case. It's incredible, honestly. It's a great, I'll use the word story. Although it is definitely something that's considered an incident, the story behind the incident or of the incident is incredible. Very, very good. And it goes way beyond just these two creatures being found. There were a ton of sightings of UFO, low-flying, unidentified aircraft in the sky. People were being pestered by these craft as well. A lot of stuff, man. A lot of stuff. A lot of military stuff. A lot of interaction with these creatures, especially the one I mentioned there at the end, where this military unit, it was actually a firefighting unit. In Brazil, firefighters are part of the military. And it was a firefighting unit that closed in on this area, this wooded area from all sides, and captured this creature after it was spotted going into the woods. That was a pretty intense part of the story. Now, what I thought was most interesting about the press conference yesterday, if you can call it that, was that they spoke heavily about the Varginha incident, especially at the beginning, right? The Varginha incident is not, it's not on the level of, let's say, Roswell, right? A lot of people don't know about this. A lot of people don't know about this. When people talk about UFOs and alien contact stories, Roswell is, of course, the first thing that pops into mind. The second one probably being the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. And then you have a speckling of, like Maury Island, Falcon Lake, Rendlesham, just a plethora of different ones that are kind of on that third tier. This is not one that's talked about like that. This is one that there's one book written about it. There is a big time documentary by James Fox, and it's really, really good. I want to say, gosh, what is it called? I think I know what it's called. I'm just gonna check. Yeah, okay, it's called Moment of Contact. I thought it was Moments to Contact. That's what I looked up, but it's called Moment of Contact. The documentary, directed by James Fox, is a deep dive into the infamous 1996 Varginha UFO incident in Brazil. So, Moment of Contact. I had to rent it from. I think I rented it off of Amazon Prime and watched it that way. And but I watched it when I built the script for the documentary episode. I just think it's interesting how much time they dedicated to this sort of, I would say, fourth tier UFO case. And it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, which goes to show, in my mind, that adds honesty to it. Because if they wanted the low-hanging fruit, they would have said, give us the bodies of the creatures from Roswell.
Right.
Or open up the doors to Area 51. Right? That's what they would have done. But they didn't. They reached for Varginha, Brazil. Something where apparently the rest of the world talks about constantly, right? And that whole fourth tier thing, that's from the perspective of an everyday American, right? But in South America, this story is humongous. It's known everywhere, and it's known thoroughly. But that's where we reached. Our government, or the whistleblowers, and the Congress people, they reached for Varginha. To me, that lends credence. I think that it's very interesting that that's what they reached for. I mean, if you were to predict the script, you got to admit, you would predict that they would probably call for Roswell.
Do you think that maybe the reason why they went for this one is to see if the feds are going to be honest and truthful with something small before they build up to the big things?
But here's the thing. Varginha's not small.
Well, it's not in the space of the United States, like you said.
But there's others worldwide that are smaller, right? And okay, maybe do me a favor, Jake. Look up a brief description, because I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show, and it's something that we should do. You know what? This is probably going to be one of the next Project Jackalope episodes, but look up the story of the Ariel school UFO incident. Ariel as in like the Little Mermaid. Ariel. Ariel. It was in, I want to say it was in Zimbabwe. And it was like 1994. It was a schoolhouse incident.
On September 16th, 1994, over 60 school children at the Ariel School in Rua, Zimbabwe, witnessed a mass UFO sighting. During the morning recess, the children observed one or more silver craft descend from the sky and land in the brush nearby. Many of the students reported seeing small beings emerge from the craft who communicated telepathic warnings about the environment and the dangers of technology.
So apparently there was samples taken from the ground, a lot of recordings of interviews being done with the children and the teachers of that school. This is something that is talked about more in the UFO community around the world and here compared to Varginha.
Right, but Varginha, the difference between this one and Varginha is that according to the story of Varginha, the U.S. government has something to do with it.
Okay, fair.
Right, so that's why I'm saying...
Good connection, yeah.
That's why I'm saying that something small that wasn't necessarily entirely the United States had to do with it, something that we would know whether it was true or not, whether there was a body moved or something like that, but it's small in comparison to Roswell, building
Yeah,
to the point where you're saying, "All right, crack that thing open, let's see the bodies," right?
but even then, man, there was a dozen or so incidents from World War II with Foo Fighters of apparent, captured UFOs.
Mm,
Um, and the Scandinavian ghost rockets, or even reports of the Nazi bill. And
mm,
not saying Project Paperclip, when that all occurred, we had to have picked their brains about the Nazi bill.
right.
And because all of that happened at the same time as the ghost rockets and the Foo Fighters, I don't know. I feel like there was lower hanging fruit, even in the situation where the U.S. government was attached. Varginha it's an incredible story, and I've always been surprised that it wasn't more popular, more talked about, and didn't get more coverage, because I do believe that it's up there, maybe even higher, as credible UFO lore or an incident in general than Roswell was. Um, I don't know. I think it's interesting that they chose Varginha. I like it. I don't let that get away. I love that they came out swinging with, hey, we want answers to the Varginha case, because I think it's incredible. When I started watching that presser, man, I was kind of just waiting for some bullshit. But then they dropped Varginha, and I was like, dude, this is good stuff. This is legitimate stuff. This is not, they're not scraping the top of the barrel with this. They're actually, they dug for some meaningful demands.
Well, then maybe that's why, because maybe they know through whistleblower testimony, or it's highly unlikely that the Roswell incident actually involved the recovery of bodies, and this is one that is way more credible because of the event, right? It's less talked about, but it's also less theorized about, like people just making wild accusations out of thin air. Um, Maybe it was brought up because of the things that the people who spoke about it know about it, and they're trying to get a litmus test, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but of the government, seeing if they're going to be honest and truthful. Kind of like if you're being questioned by a cop who already knows, like they already know that you're intoxicated, but they want to find out if you're going to be truthful or not, type stuff, right?
See,
It's like,
that's more down the aisle than I was thinking too. That
right?
they
It's like,
swung for this because they know there's something.
right. And they're just looking to see if the feds are gonna be honest and truthful. And then maybe they bring in some more, maybe in future releases or questionings or whatever you wanna call this, they bring in more aggressive, situations, right? Because I mean, but then again, there's so much top secret crap, I'm sure, inside of like Area 51 or Groom Lake or S4 or whatever you want to call it. I mean, even if they gave access for the bodies, there wouldn't be access to walk in there because of all the stuff that's probably there, right? Planes that are
Yes.
being developed, weapon
Yeah.
systems that are being developed, all kinds of stuff.
Non-UFO
So,
related shit.
right. So I'm
Actual
sure,
national defense
right.
issues.
So I'm sure that there's like more stuff than if they just had alien bodies or whatever, right? But this is one where it could be confirmed, and it's at a lot lower level where the federal government wouldn't get quite as squirrely about saying yes or saying no and maybe producing evidence.
That's a good point.
Maybe. I don't know.
Put the ball in another country's court. Let them break the seal. Even though the Brazilian Minister of Defense of the time said that he will only croak when the U.S. starts to sing. But still, at the same time, the amount of evidence that the country of Brazil has, oh my gosh, dude, there are so many major UFO events that come out of Brazil. Colores and Varginha being the two biggest ones. But I mean, Jacques Vallée spent so much time in Brazil, and the crap that he wrote about in his books were intense. It was incredible. I would love to know all the secrets that Brazil has on this stuff, because I think that they might even have more than we do. It'd be interesting. Anyways, you ready to move on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. David Grush has now said publicly, under penalty of perjury in congressional hearings and in a press conference on the steps of the United States Capitol, that the government has recovered craft of non-human origin. What he said on June 9th went further than anything he has said in those earlier settings, and I want to walk through it carefully because the specifics matter. In his official duties as a government intelligence officer, Grush said he was exposed to both human and signals intelligence about foreign adversary programs specifically focused on UAP crash retrieval, exploitation, and study. He cross-verified that foreign intelligence internally, meaning independent sources inside U.S. government programs, confirmed what foreign governments were separately telling us about each other's activities. He said he was exposed to what he called U.S.-held audio-visual information, specifically related to crash retrieval matters, and he named 2 categories of recovered material: vehicles and associated biological material. He said that much of what the president's team has been told about this issue has been filtered through what he describes as high-ego, politically appointed actors who have, through a combination of incompetence and malicious intent, subverted the president's own disclosure order. He also named the Defense Intelligence Agency specifically as an entity that has withheld foreign intelligence from Congress despite lawful requests, and called on it to stop obstructing Luna's task force. When a reporter asked him how many species the government is aware of, Grush described a continuum. He said it ranges from what he called corporeal, bipedal type life, physical beings with bodies, all the way to what he described as sentient plasma life. He said there are several that the government is aware of, and that he didn't have access to a complete compendium. But the implication was clear: more than one, more than physical, and well documented. He described billions of dollars in what he called slush funds connected to these programs. He said the secrecy infrastructure traces back to a 1954 Eisenhower executive order that created the framework for keeping this outside of normal constitutional oversight, and he suggested that framework has been used and abused for 7 decades by people who have no legal authority to make those decisions unilaterally. He described his own situation, still fighting for his medical military retirement, still dealing with what he says was an effort by the Air Force, working with the external agency to investigate him under the Espionage Act after he testified before Congress. He paid for what he said. He is still paying for it, and he stood on those steps and said more. So Jake, a continuum from physical bipedal beings to sentient plasma life, recovered biological material, billions in unaccounted funds, and Grush describing the cost he has personally paid for saying any of this publicly. What does it mean to you that he keeps saying, or that he keeps saying it anyway?
Well, I like that he totally said what I said months ago when
You caught it.
When we were first
Yes.
talking about this. I was like, just because the president, whoever the president might be at the time, gives an executive order does not mean that the people in the cabinet are going to play ball.
That's actually not what I was referring to. But yes, that too.
Well, they're going to hold on to the goods. But I mean, it makes sense that he would continue saying the things that he's saying, because I mean, he's already being punished. So at what point do you just say, screw it, I'm just gonna do what I want because it's not getting me anywhere anyway, right?
So I want to read this this longer sentence, this run-on sentence, if you will, again, and I want to see if you can tell me what you think what he was alluding to here. He said the secrecy infrastructure traces back to a 1954 Eisenhower executive order that created the framework for keeping this outside of normal constitutional oversight. And he suggested that framework has been used and abused for 7 decades by people who have no legal authority to make those decisions unilaterally.
Well, that sounds like either compartmentalization in the military, but more so compartmentalization into black budget programs and government contractors.
Contractors.
Right. Well,
Exactly.
I mean, I get where you were going with that, but I liked how in the first part he kind of, balanced out with what I was saying. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. You submit a FOIA request to the federal government. Great. You're not contending with the notion that the federal government has compartmentalized these programs into maybe a dozen different defense contractors that are all working on separate pieces of the pie, right?
Dozen's a low number.
Right. So, but
Yeah.
just in the last couple episodes, I mean, you brought out companies we hadn't even considered because they don't sound like the big ones, right?
Meter.
These people work on energy, or these
Yep.
people work on nuclear fission or nuclear fusion or whatever it is. It doesn't sound like anything alien related or UFO related. But then when you actually think about it, it's like, well, I guess it does. I wouldn't have thought that because as far as it probably looks like on their, who we are statement on their website, they just work on nuclear fusion or nuclear fission or nuclear energy or whatever it is. They don't tell you that they're also working on nuclear anti-gravitational propulsion, right? It's like, it's not something that's on there, even though it would fall under the umbrella of the nuclear science that they're working on, or energy, or whatever, composite materials and things like that. They wouldn't tell you that they're working on, new, was it trying to decode the secrets of an alien spaceship and what their, tiles on the outside of their ship are made out of that can withstand insane friction from how fast they go, because it falls under the umbrella of composites, right? It's just like things that you wouldn't think about, but I guess it makes sense, right? And so the government compartmentalizes these programs into, well, let's call it hundreds or tens of different companies that are all working on a separate piece of the puzzle, I guess is a better way to put it. And then you put them all together and you get the full picture of what you're looking at. However, you can't FOIA request all of them because, for one, you don't know who the heck they are. You don't know what they're working on. And the only thing people think of right off the bat is, oh, well, the federal government knows. No, not true. They know that there's a project. They don't know where it's at until the companies report back either, what annually, biannually, or whatever, and say, this is what we've discovered, this is what we're working on, or whatever. This is what we're doing with the funds that you've allotted us. And even that isn't tracked on any sort of government spending because, as we found out through Doge when it first came out, is there's billions, billions, trillions of dollars that are unaccounted for, just slopping around, to all these different, contractors and stuff. It's just absolutely insane. So yeah, it makes sense that I'm glad that, he's taken the steps to say this stuff, because this is what a lot of us have been saying. But it doesn't mean anything when a couple of podcasters say it, but it means a lot of things when someone who actually has credibility and backing and all this sort of stuff and can say that because I'm saying this information, I'm going to get penalized in this way. I'm going to have funds withheld from me from the federal government because they're angry with me. And he could probably show receipts from that. That puts a lot more credence into what he's saying versus just, a couple thousand podcasters saying, well, this is probably what it is, right? So I'm glad that at least someone's saying it.
So, man, I wish you had watched this presser, because there was it's only about 30 minutes long. You should check it out.
I will.
I think it was Eric Burleson. I could be wrong. One of them was specifically calling out how there's so much missing money and that there is for sure secret aircraft being built. And you know what he used as proof of this?
What did you say, the Tier 3B?
No, you've said it 20 times on the show already. The black helicopter.
Oh.
That took out bin Laden.
Really?
Specifically called it out.
Wow.
He said the president didn't even know about this secret helicopter that they just whipped out of nowhere to go take out bin Laden.
Right.
He literally said, I'm paraphrasing there. That's not exactly what he said, but dude, I'm telling you, you watch it and you'll know exactly. I mean, he literally says this secret helicopter.
Yeah,
Silent helicopter.
Somehow they were able to silence the engine whine and the chirping of the blades cutting through the air from the leading edges on a super stealth Black Hawk type helicopter that the president didn't know about, Obama at the time, and the pilots had never seen, but they had flown Black Hawks, and so they were chosen to fly it. And it was so quiet that the freaking terrorists in bin Laden's compound didn't know that they were there, even though they crashed until they breached the doors. That's insane, because you can hear a regular Black Hawk or a regular H-60 from a mile away. You can hear them. It's a helicopter. It sounds like a helicopter, right? You can hear a police helicopter flying overhead from a mile away, right? They're loud AF, right? Somehow it was so stealthy it was able to do this. That's absolutely crazy. And yeah, you're right. I've said it a bunch of times, because one of the SEALs, actually the SEAL who shot bin Laden, is still, gosh, I'm going to look up his name, because I always say that. I don't know the guy's name.
I am right now. Here we go.
Okay, Robert O'Neill. He said on a podcast that I watched, it might have been Rogan, I don't think so, but he said it on a podcast that he watched. He was talking about this, that when they were briefing the president, Obama, he said, okay, we're 99% sure that bin Laden's here. I think it was his nephew is there, and he's his first line of defense, all this sort of stuff. And then he's like, okay, well, is there anything else? Like, yes, these are the vehicles we're going to be taking in with us, because they're stealth helicopters, and no one had any idea. It was just came out of nowhere. And then he talked about other things. I believe he talked about like a weapon that can be fired at the cab of a vehicle, and it blows up over the top of the vehicle, and only the driver is killed. Like, it's like super pinpoint precision accuracy. And he said, and I'm sure it was just metaphorically, but he said like alien type shit technology, right?
That might be foreshadowing.
It's just just crazy stuff. So I don't know, man.
So not to cut you off, but I brought up, I went to YouTube, went to the News Nation channel on YouTube, brought up their footage from this presser, and found, ready, Jake?
Yep.
And the American people know that also. And so look, the time for disclosure is now. Disclosure today, disclosure tomorrow. The American people have a right to know. We know about these advanced technology programs. We know they come out of Area 51. They did when we went to kill Osama bin Laden with an advanced technology helicopter that Congress never funded. There's trillions of dollars missing at the Pentagon. Where does that money go? And so
there you go.
There it is. Fucking crazy. Come on, man.
Does
it not hype you up? Come on.
Yeah. That's good.
It's like,
he's like, come on. Like,
we've been talking about
already.
this shit, man. We've been talking about it for a long fucking time.
Yeah.
And now somebody
sure.
in official capacity says it.
That's
Come
nuts.
on. Fucking got my blood boiling. All right, you ready for this?
1,000 subscribers on YouTube. This is BS.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the next part. We're about halfway through. Eric Burleson gave the most significant speech on those steps yesterday, and I want to make sure it gets the attention it deserves. He has visited UAP facilities with White House authorization. He has sent formal legal demands to Meteor Corporation and MIT Lincoln Laboratory. We talked about this a couple episodes ago, and is receiving compliance from both. He has reviewed Russian and Brazilian records, and when he stood at the microphone, he wasn't making requests anymore. He was describing a constitutional crisis and naming it directly. The core of what he said is this: programs have grown so compartmentalized, this quote, by the way, that sitting presidents have been kept on a need-to-know basis by career bureaucrats who view elected leadership as temporary employees. Admirals and generals have described programs to senior officials that commanders-in-chiefs were never told about. Burleson called that what it is: not classification, but a constitutional crisis. He said there must be real penalties for officials who knowingly withhold information from Congress, that hiding behind classification is no longer acceptable, and that he addressed the president directly by saying the agencies have lied to him personally and about him personally, and that this is the moment to use the authority that comes with the office. He also described something that I think is the single most telling detail from the entire press conference. A piece of MQ-9 drone footage documenting a UAP incident off the coast of Yemen was delivered to his congressional office not through normal classified channels, but through what he called a Tom Clancy-style dead drop. Someone felt that the only safe way to get information to an elected official was to hand it to them covertly, because the channels that are supposed to protect people who do exactly this don't actually work. Burleson asked the obvious question, quote, "Why would anyone fear bringing information to Congress?" The answer is embedded in the question, and everybody in that crowd understood it. In the post-conference scrum, a reporter asked Burchett directly about the missing scientists that we've covered here on this show, specifically about General McCaslin. Burchett said he had heard nothing official on it, and then, without prompting, he said, of course, there's something going on. He put it simply, if 14 rabbis or 14 preachers or 14 used car salesmen had disappeared, people would be asking questions. We have been covering this story on this show since the count was 5. The man who sits in classified briefings with every major intelligence agency said, standing on the Capitol steps, that of course something is going on. That is where that story now sits. Luna closed the formal remarks by announcing that the task force's next call to action is a request for permanent immunity, not temporary protection, permanent, for anyone who can come forward with knowledge of craft locations or advanced technologies. She said a White House meeting is already scheduled and the administration is willing to entertain granting that immunity under the Espionage Act. If that becomes policy, the number of people who can legally speak without consequence changes overnight. And whatever has been held back by fear of prosecution becomes available in a way it has never been before. So, Jake, a constitutional crisis named directly a drone footage dead drop to a congressman's office, Burchett saying, of course, something is going on with the missing scientists, and permanent Espionage Act immunity potentially on the table. Where do you think it goes from here, man?
Man, it's like, why would anyone fear bringing this to Congress? Because people go missing, because people kill themselves suddenly, just out of nowhere, after making awesome discoveries that are going to positively affect humanity. People just die, right? People go and have tragic incidents just happen out of nowhere. It's just wild. Because of corruption, that's why. Yeah, no, I mean, I understand. Okay, I understand the thought process behind it. If of the president being a temporary employee, I get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot of mouths to keep quiet about things that are important, especially since presidents are not, and I'm talking about all presidents, not one side or the other, but presidents in general are not infallible. And they're definitely not excluded from saying really dumb things in really inappropriate times, right? So I understand the idea of keeping the head of the thing, a general or an admiral, being the guy that knows the thing, because he's been doing it or she's been doing it for probably in the ballpark of a few decades, and keeping that away from someone who's going to be in the position of a need to know for 4 years or 8 years. I understand the idea, but however, we do in fact have a constitution that we run under. We don't base our laws off of people's feelings and what they think is okay or not okay or appropriate or inappropriate. We base our laws and our course of actions off of a constitution. And so if the constitution demands disclosure for the person who's supposed to be the highest level in the United States, then people have to play ball with that. And if they don't, then there should be consequences, because we also have laws that say these are what the consequences are for failure to do your due diligence and to inform the person that's supposed to know. So I can, both things can be true at the same time, and I can understand both sides of that coin. But if we're in an age now where, the president should know everything, and it's constitutionally legal that happens, and it's also constitutionally I guess stated the recourse of failure to do so, then I guess that's where we're at, and I'm totally down with it. because that's how things stay the way that they need to be, right?
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do from there if the president no longer is the president, is now a former president, and I think we have one that's roaming the planet right now that doesn't remember what he did last Tuesday and is just blabbering on about nothing, right? And he
Mhm.
starts dropping major secrets. I don't know what you do in that point, but you're gonna have to figure it out. But I think that's I mean, I'm totally in agreement with that. I guess as long as it's not threatening our national security. Like I'm not a bootlicker, but I also don't want our enemies to know of stealth aircraft and things like that. And I understand the secrecy, right? It makes sense. I mean, I didn't have a huge classification. I had a secret classification, but allowed me to do certain things that a person off the street that also could troubleshoot wiring and read wiring diagrams wasn't allowed to do, right? Pushing
Mhm.
codes and things like that. And I
Yeah.
understand the need for secrecy because if one of those codes was able to be broken, the entire system could collapse because suddenly now our way of scrambling our signals and stuff like that could be found out by the enemy, right? So it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Why all the crypto and all that sort of stuff is in a classification level. But barring that, I think that things should be free and open to the public, especially if it has to do with all of humanity, right? Like not nuclear warfare type stuff per se, but like I'm the furthest from saying that aliens, little gray aliens from another planet exist. But say that they did, and at any point they could just snatch you up out of your bed and suck you through a window and stick metal tubes up your ass. I think that it would be good information for everybody on Earth to be aware that this is something that could happen so that you can protect yourself because you are your first line of defense against burglars and assaults and all kinds of stuff. And if aliens was another thing to be wary of, you should have the full knowledge of what you're dealing with so that you can appropriately prepare yourself, right? And not have that information withheld by some bureaucrats or some government agency that just wants to hoard all the information for themselves, even though there's billions of people that could be subject to severe damage should, if they existed, a spaceship just decide one day, let's look at the Yellow House and what they are up to,
Yeah.
It's just, let's go to that shack over there. Let's go give someone like generational trauma over there, right? Because they don't care. And you would have every knowledge and be able to protect yourself if your government cared enough to let you know that this was an actual threat that you could face, right? It tells about everything else, all the crime data, all these different things, all the, you go to any city, you can look up the crime statistics of what's the likelihood you're going to be involved in a violent crime, a mugging, a stabbing, a shooting, a jumping, whatever, right? A vehicle theft. If there's a high probability of being attacked by aliens, that would be something that people should know about, and it shouldn't be, hoarded. And if the way to get that information is dropping the Espionage Act, or at least giving people the immunity that if they come forward and say, hey, this is something that has been documented and researched and all that sort of stuff, and we feel like it's a real threat, then so be it. It should be done. People shouldn't be afraid to come forward with what they determine is a real threat to people, because this would breach, like if a nuclear warhead comes to America, I don't think it's going to come to Menominee, Wisconsin, right?
Maybe Minneapolis.
Maybe Washington, D.C., maybe L.A. and things like that. But they don't hoard information on other countries that are not fans of ours that also have nuclear weapons and could be a threat, right? They don't hoard that information. It would be very inappropriate for them to do that, because that allows you to do things like decide whether or not you want to live in a major city, right? For some
Mhm.
people, it's worth the risk because the likelihood of that happening is very slim. It probably will never happen, right? Type stuff. They don't hoard that information. They don't hoard the information about if Yellowstone erupted, the size of the impact range of people that would die. That information isn't hoarded, and you can decide if I want to live anywhere in the vicinity of Yellowstone. Is it likely that it would erupt and kill everybody within a 100-mile radius? I don't know. or 1,000-mile radius and the fallout 2,000 miles and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know. But the information's out there because scientists have deemed it necessary that people know this sort of stuff so that they can prepare for it or not worry about it, whatever, right? But it's information that's necessary. I believe that this is necessary information.
I agree.
And people shouldn't be afraid
I don't
to
think
come
the
out and
Espionage
say,
Act needs to go away.
hey, this is something that I'm worried about
this needs to be
because of what we've seen. Whether it's
specific
actually placed
protection.
in the reality of aliens existing or it's, government drones or whatever it is. Did you get that?
It kind of broke out. I think we got a storm going on right now.
Yeah, we do.
But yeah. No, I mean, I get it. I was just saying that I don't think the Espionage Act needs to go away. I think it needs to be specific protection for people coming out on this subject and other subjects too, right? But I do find the importance in the Espionage Act.
No, I don't mean that it should go away, but that
No, I know what you mean.
There should be protections that people in the government. Now, I'm not saying take everything to the Joe Rogan podcast or take everything to the media, right? If you see something weird, to just throw it out there so that everyone can see it. But they shouldn't be afraid to go to Congress and say, hey, this is something that I witnessed or this is something I was a part of. Do you think that it's necessary to tell the American people and then have avenues for doing so?
Well, I want to close with something that I think is worth mentioning because the timing of everything happening right now is the kind of thing that this show exists to point out. On June 12th, 3 days after the Capitol Steps press conference and 1 day after Patreon members hear this episode, Steven Spielberg's film Disclosure Day opens in theaters nationwide. Spielberg, the director of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the director of E.T., the filmmaker who more than anyone else shaped how an entire generation of human beings imagined what contact with non-human intelligence might look and feel like. His new film stars Emily Blunt and Colin Firth, has a budget of $115 million, and its story centers on a whistleblower's push for full disclosure to the whole world all at once. Its tagline, "The truth belongs to 7 billion people." Spielberg himself said at South by Southwest in February that he has a very strong suspicion we are not alone here on Earth right now, and that making this film is how he has worked through that suspicion. The sequence of events in this cultural moment is worth laying out. In November of 2025, The Age of Disclosure, a documentary featuring Grush and others, opened in theaters and brought this conversation to a mainstream audience on a screen rather than a congressional live stream. In February 2026, Trump issued the executive order directing every federal agency to identify and release UAP files. In May, war.gov launched and crossed 1 billion views. On June 9th, Grush stood on the Capitol steps and named specific species, specific recovered biological material, and specific slush funds, while the former Brazilian Minister of Defense confirmed a 30-year-old incident involving non-human beings. On June 12th, the most commercially powerful filmmaker in American history opens a film whose premise is that a whistleblower forces the world to accept what the government has been hiding. This show drops publicly on June 16th. I have been doing this long enough to be careful about reading meaning into timing. Coincidences, well, they happen. Things converge without coordination. But I also think there is something real in the fact that the culture and the record are moving in the same direction at the same moment. Spielberg does not make a $115 million film about UAP disclosure in a cultural vacuum. He made it because the conditions made it possible to make. The conditions that made it possible are the same conditions that put Grush on those steps yesterday. A decade of hearings, of whistleblowers, of credentialed voices, paying real prices to say things the system tried to suppress. That is what the culture absorbed. And that absorption is now showing up everywhere simultaneously. Grush was asked in the question and answer period what he thought was at stake. His answer was the sovereign contract between the citizenry and its government. He said the institutional rot that the lack of transparency on this issue produces could create conditions that are genuinely unattainable. He compared it to the Epstein files in the terms of damage that delayed truth does to public trust. The truth belongs to 7 billion people. The Spielberg film says Grush said the same thing yesterday in different words in a suit and tie with sitting members of Congress standing behind him. Whatever comes next, this is not a fringe conversation anymore, and it hasn't been for a while. We are just now reaching the moment where the fringe is the official record, and the official record is what everyone is talking about. Jake, I know you bounced out there for a second, but Spielberg opens a film about a UAP whistleblower 3 days after the biggest UAP press conference in recent American history. On the week this episode drops, after everything we've covered together, how does this moment feel to you?
I'm interested about the thing that Spielberg put out, because he said a thing about Christians, that it's going to shake our understanding of the Bible and all this
That the
nonsense.
movie will?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Here, let me look it up real quick so I can get an exact quote.
Interesting.
Steven Spielberg suggested his film Disclosure Day could raise significant theological questions for Christians regarding the cosmos. He noted the movie explores, quote, the position of the church and ponders, is God our God only on this planet, or is God a God for every system where there's a civilization, intelligent life, and developing life? I don't think it's going to shake anyone's faith, but I still want to watch it. I doubt it's going to shake my faith for anything like that. I've discussed prior that if there's any sort of alien beings, that, yeah, I'm sure that our God is the same God for them too, because he's infinite and outside of time and made everything. So sure, but I also am more in line with the idea that they aren't, extraterrestrial aliens, but in fact interdimensional beings, like, spiritual beings. But yeah, I mean, it is perfect timing, I'll tell you that much. Like, it really is, as far as him finishing up a movie and then dropping at the same time as all the disclosure and stuff like that. But it could be coincidental, but in the same time frame, it's been a couple of years of this coming. So at any point in the last couple of years, he could have dropped that, and people have been like, "Wow!" In this time frame,
True.
it's just like, wow,
True. Yeah.
So it's I think more coincidental that it's happening when actual disclosure is occurring, versus a year ago when it was just kind of the talk of, it would be cool if ... right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, hopefully the film he's put out is relevant to the time that we're in right now, and it's not just, the people he's interviewing aren't just or the story he's telling isn't just a retelling of something that we all kind of hashed out already. So, he's a great producer. I certainly hope that his work goes well for him, and I look forward to looking into it and stuff. I know that you've been looking forward to it quite a bit. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's all well placed in the time frame, and for him, it was a great move as a producer to do so. And yeah, I don't think that I'd be hard pressed to find somebody who didn't get doesn't have some sense of nostalgia looking back on the E.T. movie, and looking into their childhood and stuff like that, and remembering that movie and everything. And I think he's a great producer to put something like this together. So good for him. Yeah, man. I'm gonna have to definitely look into this press conference when we get off of here, and just kind of listen to it and stuff. That's crazy that he put out the secret helicopters and everything. It's so weird to be in this position of like I thought it was kind of weird when we were talking about the scientists and stuff. You wrote it into the script and everything. We were talking about the scientists and everything. I was like, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And then it got more traction. It's like, and then I got coworkers asking me about it. It's like, hey, you do that podcast, right? What do you think about this? And I was like, man, we've talked about that like 3 months ago. Like, it's crazy, It's like, that came up a long time ago, and it's just now blowing up everywhere, and there's things that we're talking about now that we've been talking about for years. It's just absolutely nuts, right? We're just like, for us, it's just like, yeah, common information. But for everyone else, it's
Right.
like, oh, never heard about this before, which is absolutely insane. Again, you talking about the Virginia incident, gosh, maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. It's been
it's
so
longer
long
than
that
that.
I can't even remember it, but here it is on front page news. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, it's just a weird position to be in where it's like, and I'm sure that there was a lot of people that listened to those and were just like conspiracy theorists or yeah, okay, whatever. And then here we are, right? But I do like that quote that you put out. I can't remember who said it, but it was absolutely, it really like put the missing scientist thing into the forefront of my mind, because it was, if 14 preachers went missing, or 14 pastors went missing, or 14, like, I don't know, what
Car
like
salesman.
car salesman. I was going to say mailman or something like that, but car salesman went missing. Yeah, that would be weird. You know, there would be a lot of people being like, what the heck is going on? And they wouldn't have to have any sort of like any relation to each other whatsoever. It could be from California to Maine. 14 pastors have disappeared. There would be a lot of talk about that, right? It would be super crazy. And I never made that connection in my brain of take scientists out of it, of whatever flavor, and put any other person in that position. Like, how weird would that would be? And we would just be talking about what happened to these mailmen, or what happened to these, whatever, right? And yeah, I mean, that's, when you think about it like that, it's like, oh gosh, so yeah, I mean, those scientists don't have to have any relation to each other whatsoever. It's just strange that has happened over the last decade, that 14 of them have gone missing. And for the most part, the police have been like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like all the missing 411 cases. Oh, they disappeared. Oh, well, weird.
They just happen to be scientists for anti-gravitical and nuclear propulsion.
Yeah.
It's like, I'd be more concerned if it was mailmen.
Yeah. Right? Who's going to deliver my Amazon packages? Yeah. 14 Amazon delivery drivers have gone missing. The world would burn. Like, it would be crazy. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to it, and I'm interested to get into what was actually said in this last briefing. But then, gosh, I need to stay on top of this sort of stuff.
This is why I do it. This is why I do the news. Like, this is why Infinite Rabbit Hole has pivoted to being fringe news, because we can stay on the front lines of this.
Right.
I mean, I'm good at it, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here or anything, but this is what I do from the moment I wake up every night to the moment I go to bed. Like, I'm literally going to close my laptop here, go upstairs, lay in bed, and flip through my phone trying to get next week's script ready to go, because that's what I do. So, do you have to do it? No, you don't. You just have to show up to the episodes.
Well, but I want to stay on top of it because, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting information that's getting put out that I want to be aware of. Like,
there is.
What's the next thing, right? Who's going to say what? Who's going to be in front of Congress, or who's going to interview the president? Who's going to, do this? What's the president going to do about this? Is he going to take the information and run with it and say, you're right, there's a bunch of people that are hiding things from me and they need to be held accountable? Or is it going to be like, compartmentalization and just move on to the next thing? Let's bomb Iran. I don't know.
I was just gonna say, who has all those secret alien documents?
Yeah.
Iran.
It'd be a real shame if they got invaded.
That's fucked up.
I don't know, but I don't know what's going to happen with that. But yeah, I need to definitely stay on top of it, because it's an interesting time frame that we're living in.
It is.
And just going back to, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now, just the simple fact that I was very worked up over the idea that people aren't recognizing the win of getting the federal government to admit that they're a bunch of dirty, filthy liars is crazy. But right now, I mean, it feels like we're so far past that, and we're really not in just time frame. But this is a level of disclosure that people only dreamt about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just like, maybe one day we're there. We're right here. Now it remains to be seen. Are they going to continue to be honest, or is the door going to crack open and a little bit of information is going to come out and they're going to be like, ooh, and they're going to slam the door shut and be like, nope, no more. I don't know.
It probably.
Because all of this could end tomorrow.
It could.
And I think that the people Grush, other folks who are getting the truth out of Congress, out of the president, out of just call them the federal government in general. I think that they are probably the best people to do this because, like we discussed in the beginning of this episode, talking about I always want to say the vagina incident. Talking about the vagina incident.
Varginha.
I know, Varginha incident. It's a silly name. All right. Talking about either vagina or Virginia, the Varginha incident versus jumping down the throats of the federal government, asking about the bodies in Area 51 and having that door slammed shut and lock in their face. I think it's purposeful and it's for a reason. And maybe it's just a test to see if the feds are going to be honest.
Time will tell, my friend.
Yep. So
time will tell.
Good episode, man. I like it.
And when it happens, we'll be here to talk about it.
We will.
Spread the news. Infinite Rabbit Hole talks about this shit early.
Yeah. Talks about the stuff before your coworkers do.
All right, man. You ready to close it out?
Yes, sir.
All right. That was a special episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. No worries. We're going right back to the typical format after this episode. Just when big news drops, expect something like this. On June 9th, James Fox asked the President of the United States to declassify 30 years of files on Varginha, Brazil, where a police officer who transported a non-human being died 3 weeks later, and where the former Minister of Defense has now confirmed publicly that it happened. Grush named specific species, recovered biological material, and slush funds running into the billions, and said the agencies responsible have subverted a direct presidential order. Burleson called it a constitutional crisis. Burchett said, of course something is going on with the missing scientist. Luna announced that Permanent Espionage Act immunity for whistleblowers is on the table. And in 3 days from the day of this recording, Steven Spielberg opens a film about a whistleblower pushing for full disclosure to the whole world at once, because the culture is ready for that conversation in a way it has never been before. We will be back next week. Whatever happens between now and then, and something will happen between now and then, we will be here. My book, UF Elmwood, is on Amazon now. MUFON, Wisconsin is July 18th at the Waukesha Airport. Elmwood UFO Days is July 24th, 25th, and 26th, where I will be presenting and leading bus tours. I hope to see you at one of them. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating and review. Links for everything are in the description. Until then, keep your eyes open, keep asking questions, and remember the truth is out there. You just have to know where to look. I'm Jeremy Sosha, and we'll see you in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. If you're looking for more of our stuff, head on over to infiniterabbithole.com, where you can find links to all the podcast players that we are available on, and even our video platforms such as TikTok and YouTube. While you're there, make sure to check out all the links for our socials and hit that follow so you know when all the new stuff from our podcast comes out. And until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye.